Corta. He finished his English student's degree 2 years ago. 2 years ago, last year he presented his master thesis, and now he's doing his PhD thesis with us. And it's a pleasure because he's not too far again from you, okay, in time. But he's a brilliant student, and it's a pleasure for both Martin and I to have this type of students working with us. Today, he's going to speak about dragons in Ursula K. Le Guin's Earthsea, the revision of a myth, which is also related to the main topic of this international conference. And you know that after his speaking, you can ask whatever you want, okay? So, thank you, and we can start. Yeah.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I would also like to thank both Raul and Martin for giving us the opportunity of being here, speaking to all of you. So, as Raul said, my topic today is dragons in general, but specifically what I want to achieve today is to show you how the image of dragons might have changed from a more traditional British or Anglo-Saxon background to a more recent North American literary production. For that, I'm going to focus in three authors mainly, or three works. First, we are going to see how dragons were portrayed in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, looking at works such as Beowulf or The Hobbit. And for the North American part, we are going to be looking at the work of Ursula Le Guin, concentrating on her Earthsea cycle, which is a cycle composed of somehow 7 or 6 books. So, the structure of my presentation is the one you have here. And first I'm going to show you how dragons have been portrayed traditionally in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, and looking at these features that are shared between the dragon in Beowulf and the dragon in The Hobbit. And then we are going to be looking at certain peculiarities that appear in the figure of Smaug. Moving on to the second part of the presentation, we are going to focus on dragons in Earthsea. And we are going to be able to see that although Le Guin makes use of features appearing in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, she grants her dragons with a whole new symbolism, in that she makes them symbols or representatives of nature. And finally, we are going to sum up everything and reach some very general conclusions. So, starting with dragons in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, the first feature that we should mention is that in both works, both in Beowulf and The Hobbit, dragons are portrayed with this classical image, in that they are winged beings that can fly and that can belch forth, they can throw fire. As you can see in this quotation, for example, the dragon in Beowulf, we're told that he was called the air-going ranger, or that about Smaug, Shippey says that Smaug has both wings and in the belly he keeps hot fire. Then another very commonplace feature regarding dragons is the place in which they live, which is usually this under-earth place like a den or a cave, in which also they hoard treasures. In the case of the dragon in Beowulf, we're told that ancient ornaments in the earth cave were lying, dear valued jewels. And about Smaug, well, if you don't know, Smaug lives in a city that formerly belonged to the dwarves. And about this city now we're told that beneath him, beneath Smaug, lay countless piles of precious things. Another feature that both dragons share is the manner in which they engage with the human societies surrounding them. And this kind of relationship always has this element of hostility, of enmity, by means of which dragons will always attack the cities of the humans. If you read the quotations, well, about the dragon in Beowulf, we're told that yet he joyed in the battle and rejoiced in the conflict. And for example, in the case of Smaug, when he becomes aware that Bilbo has stolen his cup, he's enraged and he decides to attack the city of Lake. And well, we're told that his fire belcheth forth, the hall smoked, he shook the mountain roots. So this dangerousness is also present in both dragons. And the last feature that I would like to mention is this one. And about the dragon of Beowulf, we're told that he is poisonous, and in fact this is the ultimate reason why Beowulf dies. About Smaug, we wouldn't say that he is poisonous or venomous, but rather he is treacherous. And it is his words, his speech that we could think of as poisonous, because Bilbo has to be extremely aware when dealing with him, because believing everything that Smaug has to tell him may make him come under the dragon spell, and this would be fatal for him, of course. Now, there's also certain features that are peculiar to Smaug that he doesn't share with the dragon in Beowulf. One of these is his intelligence. Smaug is extremely knowledgeable, not only because he can speak, but also because he can get to control people around him, of course, with his speech. About him, Tom Shippey, one of the leading Tolkien scholars, says that Smaug may be the most intelligent character that we as readers may come across in The Hobbit. And the next peculiarity that I would like to mention is Smaug's eyesight. Again, as in the case of his speech, Bilbo has to be again extremely aware of not making eye contact with Smaug, because making this eye contact would mean that again he would be able to come under the dragon spell and be controlled by Smaug. Now, about dragons in Earthsea. We said that there's certain features that are shared with these dragons belonging to the Anglo-Saxon tradition. The ones are the ones we have listed here. Of course, these dragons are also portrayed as beings that can fly and that can throw fire. About some of them, we're told that they are greedy. Some of them, very few, but they do keep treasures, and they are very jealous about their treasures. Another feature is their knowledge. These dragons are extremely knowledgeable, and this is related to what I'm going to talk about later. As you can see, this feature of knowledge is written in red because it is related only to Smaug. We don't find it in the dragon in Beowulf, so I just put it in red. And another feature is that these dragons, or at least some of them, also engage with humans in this hostile attitude, in that they are fearsome for humans and that they attack their cities. Some of them are also said to be poisonous, and as in the case of Smaug, their eyesight is also extremely dangerous. It is extremely impossible for a person in the Earthsea world to make eye contact with a dragon. Now, about the peculiarity of dragons in Earthsea. First of all, I would like to, well, as I said, I'm going to try and prove that these dragons are actual symbols of nature. But before giving the true features that may lead us to think that way, I would like to explain to you somehow the precedents of the dragons in Earthsea. So, about the creation of Earthsea, we are told that there was a god creator called Segoi, who by speaking the language of the making, created both the earth, the land, and the seas of Earthsea. We're also told that at the very beginning, there was just one race, composed by both humans and dragons, who spoke this very same language of the making. So as you can see in this quotation, it says that dragon and human were all one. They were all one people, one race, winged and speaking the true language. However, there's a critical historical event, as you can see here, called the Vedurnan, which is some sort of a division or agreement within this original race. What happens is that this race is going to branch out into several different races. For example, we have those ones who would gradually tend to only be interested with the winds and flying, so that these ones would be the ones gradually becoming dragons as we know them today. And about them, we are told that they were wild, they were free. It is important to bear in mind also that they kept this knowledge of the language of the making. And about them, we are told that they went west and they would live in the western part of Earthsea. Now, opposite to this are the ones who would gradually become humans. The reason why they became humans is that they rejected this knowledge of the making in exchange of a knowledge for being able to creating things with their own hands. Why? Because they began to become greedy and they wanted to have more and more possessions. However, since they became afraid of these ones who became dragons, we are told that they sailed east and they built their cities in the eastern part of the world. And as you can see, there's another race which I've called the in-betweeners, who remained in between both the races of humans and dragons. About them, we're told that they were wise, they were also free, and that they didn't live neither on the western part or the eastern part of the world. They lived farther west than west in some sort of a paradise-like place, which we're not sure if it is an actual physical place or more of a spiritual place. About this race, we are told that they're farther west than west. They live in peace, great winged beings, both wild and wise, with human mind and dragon heart. So they remain right in the middle of the races of dragons and humans, in connection with both races, somehow. Now, about the actual features that may make us think of dragons as representatives of nature are the following. First, they are said to be the oldest living creatures in Earthsea. As you can see here, dragons existed before any other living creatures, so that they were the first, and after them, the rest came. Now, it is also extremely interesting, for me at least, that throughout the books, there's this hint made that dragons being granted this role of creators as well. And this can be found, for example, in this quotation, when it says that, if you remember, Segoi was this creator god that created the world of Earthsea. So it says that it may be that Segoi is or was one of the old powers of the earth. It may be that Segoi is a name for the earth itself. Something that all dragons, or certain dragons, are manifestations of Segoi. So already this connection between this god creator Segoi and the dragons is being hinted at. Although it's not 100% established, it's at least hinted at. Now, another feature is that dragons are always said to be above humans, so that in this hierarchy of Earthsea, we have dragons and beneath them humans. Dragons think of humans as amusing, as simple flies. They're insignificant for them. And of course, this attitude owes a lot to the fact that dragons are extremely powerful in Earthsea. In fact, I think there's only a couple of instances in which an actual human being can get to control a dragon, to claim dominion over a dragon somehow. Well, here I would like to introduce you to the figure of Khalesin, who is Khalesin is the eldest of dragons in Earthsea. Khalesin has no gender. It's not either a male nor a female. It's just Khalesin, okay? So the thing with Khalesin is that it covers all the aforementioned features, in that Khalesin is the oldest, the most powerful. Of course, Khalesin is above humans. And also there's this hint made again at Khalesin being granted this role of God creator Segoi. This happens in a scene in which an individual belonging to that race of the in-betweeners addresses Khalesin straightforwardly as Segoi. So again, this establishes this link between dragons and this creator figure is established again. Now, another very interesting feature that we should mention is the relationship that dragons have with the language of the making. If you remember, we said that dragons, when they divided themselves from the humans, they stuck to this knowledge of the language of the making, or old speech. And well, about the language of the making, you can read it here. It says that it is the language with which Segoi created the islands of Earthsea at the beginning of time, and is presumably an infinite language, as it names all things. The interesting thing with this language is that it contains all the true names of everything that surrounds us. So that, For example, if I was to speak the true name of the wind, I would be able to control the wind as it would please me. Or if I would speak the name of a rock, I would be able to control that rock with my mind and everything. About the relationship that the dragons have with this language, it is some sort of a mother tongue. It is a characteristic that is innate to them. You can read it more clear in this quotation where it says that the dragon and the speech of the dragon are one. They are one being, they do not learn it, they are this language. Of course, opposite to this situation, we have the situation of human beings who, back at the very beginning of the times, forsook, they rejected this knowledge, so that nowadays they have to learn it. It is very important for humans to learn this language because the language is the basis for the wizardry or the magic that is performed in Earthsea. So that those wizards who gain deepest knowledge about the true speech or the old speech or the language of the making are called the Dragon Lords. So a Dragon Lord would be one whom the dragons will speak with, a person who would be in speaking terms, in direct speaking terms, somehow in a same relationship, same status with a dragon. So now, if we, after seeing all this, if we think of dragons as actual symbols of nature, and we go back to this event of the Vedurnan, of the separation between the races of humans and dragons, we could also think or deduce that, well, now we should be able to see cases in which the human society has, in a sense, alienated from nature. Yes, this in which this distance between nature and human societies has been widened importantly. And actually this is the case because, for example, in places like Atuan, in which formerly the powers of the earth or the nature itself was worshipped, now we find the case that human-like god figures are worshipped. So they have passed from worshipping nature as a whole to worshipping, let's say, a person. Also, in other places of Earthsea, we learn that in order to gain profit from the resources that nature has to offer us, the environment is being utterly destroyed. So that all in all, this link or this bondage that could have existed at the very beginning of times has been broken, has snapped. And nature has gone one way and human society has gone the other way. And now, one last link that I would like to establish between dragons and nature can be found in this quotation. This is Khalesin addressing these other dragons. And Khalesin says, "You let evil turn you into evil. You have been mad. You are sane again. But so long as the winds blow from the east, you can never be what you were, free of both good and evil." What this means is that although dragons were originally free of these categories of good or evil, they were just free beings. It was the winds coming from the east, it was the influence coming from the lands of humans, which made them become good or evil. I think that here we can find similarities with the manner in which we engage sometimes with nature as humans. For example, I think that if the weather is good or imagine that the crops grow abundant, many people will think that, well, nature is something good, nature is something that is there to help us. But however, whenever these natural disasters happen in which, for example, hurricanes or floods or droughts or earthquakes, whatever, and people die due to this, well, some may think that, okay, maybe nature is not that good. Nature also has its evil side. However, I think that what we forget is that nature cannot be put, again, in these Manichaean, let's say, categories that we have created of good or evil. Nature just is above those categories. We have to bear in mind that nature is just nature. Nature just is. Okay. And so, with all this, I think that we have seen, relating to the evolution that dragons may have suffered from the British tradition to the North American, more recent literary production, is that although they feature these characteristics belonging to the traditional image of the dragon, and mainly in their bodily appearance and in the way in which they engage with the human societies surrounding them, we have been able to see how Le Guin tries to grant these dragons with a whole new dimension, in that she makes them representatives of nature. I think this can be seen in the fact that they are the oldest creatures in the earth, and that after them comes everything. Also the fact that it is hinted more than once that they may have had this role of creators in the world of Earthsea, or even this relationship that they have to the language of the making. Because if we think of the power that this language of the making can grant to an individual, I think that we may take this language as symbolizing all the, let's say, all the functioning of nature itself. So that if anyone gets to know actually this whole language, would have absolute control over nature. And in a sense, the humans in Earthsea trying to learn this language in order to perform magic reminds me also of our own science, always trying to know more about the universe surrounding us, and many times using this new knowledge or intelligence in order to achieve things that could benefit us. And well, these were the works that I've cited and that I've used for this presentation, and hope you enjoyed it, or at least you learned something interesting. Thank you.
Okay, John, thank you very much. You have said many things, some of them, I mean, even, let's say it's full of thought, especially that idea of nature is, and that idea of categorizing everything can be quite restful, something that we do pretty much, to be honest. Anyway, I'm going to let my comments just for the end, because now it's time for questions, so feel free to ask whatever you want. Just raise your hand, you know how it works.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Know that you have been working previously with the work of J.R.R. Tolkien and also the work of William Morris, right? Mm-hmm. Both were British writers. And especially Tolkien, he would employ dragons as a symbol of evil. And that is also the sense that medieval literature attributes to the dragons, for example, in Beowulf, right? So in a sense, the dragons in European tradition, all the way up to the 20th century, have been rooted in they have been a symbol of evil, and they couldn't really escape from that. It was almost impossible to make use of dragons in a different sense in Europe. Now, your presentation deals with a North American writer, and furthermore, a writer of the American West. So I was wondering, what are the implications of this transfer from Europe to North America, and by extension also to the American West, and how is that important for this new portrayal of dragons? That is, to some extent, one would even be able to say that Ursula Le Guin, she sets the dragons free from the previous bounds in literature. But what's the influence of this new, let's say, the area in which this literature has been created, which is the American West? Ursula Le Guin, she was a writer from San Francisco. Can you say anything about this?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Martin. I think that, well, from what I've been able to read, I think it owes a lot to Le Guin being born in this western part of North America, around San Francisco and all this. I think her portrayal of dragons as both also representing I mean, they also have these features of good and evil, the dragons themselves. But I think this owes a lot to her following this doctrine of Taoism, which may also have derived from the fact that she might have come into contact with this Asian culture because she lived in the western part of North America, and in that part of the continent, well, a lot of Asian immigrants lived at that time. So, from what I've been able to read in these Oriental doctrines, dragons are also representatives of the yin and the yang, both conveying good and evil, together with the image of the tiger, I think. So I think all in all this owes a lot to her following this doctrine of Taoism and living in contact with all these different ethnic groups.
Yeah, this is one of the features, right, of San Francisco in the 1950s, 1960s. This is a place in which it's another melting pot, if you wish, right, with a lot of influence from Asia, as you say. Also, perhaps something could be said in terms of nature as such, right, the nature of the American West and the way in which the dragons relate to nature in the works of Le Guin, right?
I'm sure there could be. I haven't thought about it yet, but I mean, I believe that no work is free from the influence of the author, so that any of the life experiences of the author are always in the work of that author. So that, I mean, for sure, the environment of the West America and all these natural features of this land, I mean, they might have influenced Le Guin's work for sure a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that what we have in the American West is basically this idea, the preponderance of nature, this nature threatening to overwhelm human beings,
yeah.
and also a different relationship to nature. I mean, in North America, we get nature as being treated as monuments, it's monumental nature. This is the heritage of the North Americans. They don't have as long a history, at least the Europeans that arrived at the North American continent. They don't have these old cathedrals, right, as in Europe, but they do have this monumental nature, and they respect the nature and they venerate the nature in a different way compared to Europeans who have been applying themselves for thousands of years to just exploiting nature, right? So I was just thinking along those lines. That
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
maybe there's an influence there.
Really. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jan.
Thank you.
Okay, more questions? Don't you like dragons? Okay, when I was just checking your presentation, I have seen just the moment of the background related to the Anglo-Saxon tradition and so on, and I have missed one key dragon probably in Anglo-Saxon tradition, which is one of the icons of Christendom, which is St. George and the dragon. Why have you let the dragon apart? Any?
No, there isn't a reason. Just wanted to stick to the time of 20 minutes.
Okay, right.
There's no specific reason.
Okay, right, because I guess it's quite important because they are traditionally speaking like two main dragons in the tradition. One is the snake dragon, which is that idea of the snake being a dragon, which comes from the biblical side, and then secondly, that same image, which is going to be the one of St. George and the dragon, especially during medieval times, which is going to become more and more important. And I guess that in terms of the dichotomy of good and evil, to take that part into account is pretty important because we can recognize easily how dragons were bad, in a sense, from the Anglo-Saxon traditional point of view. Yeah. Then the other step is going to be missed when we turn into, Ursula Le Guin's work. So I think it's just food for thought, but I think that can be quite handy when you present, the study.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't think about that, to be honest.
Okay, good. Come on, more questions. Come on, you can ask about Eragon if you want. Or
I haven't watched it, so.
No, neither do. Yeah, that's ready. Okay, we have no more. Yeah, one more over here. Please, Andoni.
You ask, as you explained the work sea, Earthsea, you mentioned different. I'm not familiarized with those books, but you mentioned different elements. And for example, I'm not sure who, but they didn't know good and evil. And for example, at the beginning, it seemed to me as if they live in harmony and everything was perfect, and then there's a fall.
Yeah.
So all those things, the Bible came to my mind when hearing you say that. So and then you mentioned that the author probably had influences of Taoism, but I wonder if you have considered the possible influences of the. Well, to me it seemed that or the I mean. The influences that the Bible may have in this saga.
To be honest, I haven't reached to that point yet. But
Okay.
I mean, it's a possibility, of course, because as she lived in a place where so many, so many cultures and so many ways of looking at the world came into contact. I mean, it's 100% possible that she might have been influenced by the Bible as well, of course. Yeah. Thanks for your question.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, any other question? So just before finishing, I'm going to ask you the same thing that I have done in the morning with Valen. Do you mind to tell them something about your experience or about, is it important to do a research after finishing your degree in something that you really like, such as, literature? I'm not just speaking just with Martin and myself, of course, but in general.
Well, I think that, of course, if literature is something that you love and that you wouldn't mind working around literature for your life, I mean, it's totally recommendable that you do something like this. And furthermore, if you want to, at least from my point of view, what we do here is also could be possibly a way in which we could help, for example, get this fantasy literature genre to other heights, because many times people look down on it and they don't really believe that fantasy literature can teach the whole societies a lot of things of how to deal with the world that surrounds us. So that, for example, in my case, I would be happy if anyone who thinks that fantasy literature, is worth nothing because it doesn't tell truths, then if any of those would change their minds because of reading any fantasy literature, then I would be more than happy with that. So I think we, working here as well, we have that responsibility, maybe, making people aware that all types of literatures teach us, have truths to teach us.
Thank you very much. So that's all. So thank you very much, John.